So, as we've been focusing on compassion these last few weeks, I've noticed we've moved a little bit into the realm of ethical practice, how we move the compassion practice off the cushion and into our lives. Jay spoke about compassionate listening. Lori spoke about wise speech. And we've been talking a bit also about balance, finding balance, meeting ourselves where we are, as David spoke about these last few days. And it's made me think about how some traditions in Buddhism talk about the path of the Bodhisattva as a bird with two wings, wisdom and compassion, and how these balance each other. And I was remembering a talk I once heard with Rhea Stevens, a wonderful meditation teacher. And she talked about these two wings. And she said, well, wisdom without compassion can begin to risk being a little bit dry or cold, intellectual, robotic even. And that made sense to me. But also, she said, we need wisdom. Wisdom helps us know the distance from which to have compassion. Wisdom helps us know the distance to have compassion. And that really stayed with me. It felt like almost a permission. Like, wait, I could have compassion even for all beings and still be sort of wise or measured about how I bring that in or how close I get to certain people or groups or situations or feelings even. And that felt really important as we think together about how to bring compassion into the world. So wisdom helps us know the distance from which to have compassion. Made me think about boundaries. And I was sort of contemplating, right, we can still have boundaries and be compassionate. Often in my work as a therapist, when I'm talking with clients or we wind up talking about having compassion, even considering compassion for those who maybe have caused harm, clients often can feel afraid. Like, wait, if I recognize this person's humanity, if I care for their suffering, does that mean I have to let them back into my life? No. I feel very clear, no. No. We can still care for all beings, wish well for all beings, wish all beings be free from suffering, but do that from a place of clarity and wisdom. So it made me think about, well, what is a boundary even? This word that's kind of used a lot in our world nowadays. So some definitions, something that indicates or fixes a limit or extent. Boundaries show where one thing ends and another begins. And personal boundaries can be the limits and rules we set for ourselves in relationships. And I realize it might seem strange to talk about boundaries when exploring compassion in the Brahmaviharas. Aren't we supposed to sort of dissolve boundaries and love everyone? Aren't the Brahmaviharas meant to be unconditional? Yes, and I would say yes, and. Right? We meet ourselves where we are. And saying we can have compassion for someone or some group or some situation from a wise distance means we're still having compassion. We're sensing what is the place from which our hearts can actually open, being clear about what might be safe for us. And it also sort of struck me that all ethical practices and guidelines are boundaries or ways of honoring boundaries. Think about the 5 Buddhist kind of ethical precepts. I will not take what is not mine. I will not use my body in any way that harms another. I will not use intoxicants to cloud my body and mind. I will be mindful of my speech. I will not kill, right? These are all boundaries, refraining. And what felt really important is like, right, they are boundaries that are informed by wise view and wise intention, right? Informed by that clarity that we're all connected, that we all suffer, that we all have the capacity for hatred, ignorance, and greed. And we all have the capacity for wisdom and love. And the intention of those precepts, or of hopefully any boundary we might hold, to ease suffering, to care for, to do no harm, to be kind. In a lot of ways, it felt to me like, well, boundaries are really about protection. And what does it mean to protect ourselves? We want to. We want to protect our hearts, our minds, our bodies, our loved ones, our communities, our environment. But how we do that really matters. I feel like we see in our world attempts to protect or attempts to create or hold boundaries that really come from reactivity, hatred, judgment, fear, and anger. And certainly in my world, in the mental health world, I've noticed there's more and more discussion of boundaries in a way that kind of subtly reinforces othering and judgment, right? This person is toxic and I need to keep them out, right? We can, sometimes parts of us can seek to justify holding a boundary by having to judge or other someone and identify them or a group they belong to by their behavior. You are this, rather than, oh, that behavior really affects me this way, and I need to figure out how to work with that. And I think we can explore with, as with all of these practices that we've been engaging in, kind of where our edges are and where we tend to lean, right? Do you tend toward forcing yourself to open more, right? David's beautiful poem about we can't force the heart to open. Do you tend to kind of try to take in more or be with more when you're really not in a place to do that? Or do you tend to lean further away and keep that distance, lots and lots and lots of distance, when maybe you could open up a little more or let in? I know for me, honoring my own boundaries and needs has always been a real edge. Even though I know it causes me pain and distress and isn't wise and isn't actual compassion to try to keep making more and more room for people or situations or feelings, I do it. And it may look on the surface like I'm being the bigger person, but actually it's sort of a spiritual bypass for me, because my edge is to include myself in that compassion and to trust that I can hold a boundary and it can still be kind. And that maybe some of my relationships can handle that, can hold that. And when I don't do that, I often experience a kind of inner backlash. And so we also, I think, as we explore this, what is the distance from which to have compassion? We try to be wise about our limitations, meeting ourselves where we are. We can try to be wise about other people's limitations, the world's limitations, but also kind of open to the possibility that things can change. This is also wisdom. Things are always changing. So maybe I have changed a little bit and I can hold a little more, I can open a little more, or close a little more. And also maybe this person or this group or this situation has actually changed as well. And I don't have to reify it and keep this boundary or this perception. Mark Van Buren writes, combined, wisdom and compassion create a perfect balance between stillness and movement, emptiness and fullness, and inward seeking and outward giving. And Joanna Macy, writing of this kind of these two wings, wisdom and compassion, she says, we need both of them. One isn't enough. We need the compassion because that openness to the pain of the world provides the fuel to move you out where you need to be, to do what you need to do. Yet compassion by itself, without understanding and trusting our interconnectedness, can burn you out. So you need the other wing, the wisdom that knows how interwoven we are. That wisdom that wisdom reminds us that we're not involved in a battle between good guys and bad guys. For the line between good and evil runs through the landscape of every human heart. It teaches that we are so interconnected and interexisting that even the smallest act with clear intention has repercussions throughout the web of life. But wisdom by itself is not enough to move us forward for the sake of all beings. It needs the steady, heart-opening beat of compassion. Then we fly. So I invite us all to play with this, right? Balancing wisdom and compassion, sensing the distance from which to have compassion, and knowing that we can do that internally, which I think we've talked a lot about, right? How can I relate to this feeling, this struggle, this pain? How close do I need to get, or how far do I need to be? And then as we think about bringing compassion into our world, what's the distance I might need in order to really keep my heart open to the pain that's here, wisely, safely? What boundaries might I need to honor, communicate? And how can we do that from a place that's really rooted in loving intention, in clarity? So thank you so much